And we are here with my brother, my brethren, Roy Clovis Jr. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, whenever you decide to listen to it
Whenever you're listening,
or
yes, in
watching.
your day or watching in your day. I'm so glad. So I want to preface this for our listeners. Um, really, with this podcast, I mostly bring people not only that I know, but that people that inspire me and people that I have connections with in terms of professionally or just personally. And Roy is a really, and I don't even know if he knows how special. I hope I make that clear to him. Just a really special friend and fellow artist. And I'm just super excited he's here. And I forced him. I said, "You got to be on my podcast," and he obliged. So, how is it feeling to be a guest on a podcast? Like,
Well, there are very few people who could get me to do this. So, so I've taken all of my deep breaths and I've kind of put my ideas together as best I can. It feels okay. I'm doing all right so far.
yeah, because you're used to being on the other side of the camera. And, that's what Roy, for those of you who are simply listening, if you haven't read all the show notes, Roy is a film director and an editor. And so I think, I would love to get more people who are in the behind the scenes of film and music and the arts because they're the machine. They're the machine. So I want to start before we dig all into your life, and we're not going to dig all into your life, I promise you. I am going to read, though, something about you to you. So I want you just to sit back and listen, and we'll go from there. Roy Clovis Jr. has thrived in the television and film industry for more than 25 years. He has drawn upon his many talents to create compelling and heartfelt stories through his work as a director, producer, and editor. Roy has recently focused his craft on editing thoughtful narrative and documentary projects. In 2009, Roy wrote, directed, and edited The Cycle, a 16-minute short film that screened at the 2010 Chicago International Film Festival, which I had the honor of seeing and being there and was awesome, and was selected as a finalist for the 2010 HBO Short Film Award. After winning a host of awards, including Best Drama in the Indie Producer Short Film Contest and the Screenwriting Award at the 2010 Colorado Film Festival, The Cycle was licensed for 2 years by HBO and Cinemax and aired frequently on both networks. Roy is eagerly anticipating the upcoming release of Offsides Productions' dark comedy web series, Normal Ain't Normal, for which he edited an episode. He's co writing a web series, dramedy, entitled The Campaign, which he plans to direct in 2023. Roy's projects often grapple with difficult issues. His compassion is evident in his storytelling, which helps the viewer create emotional connections to the characters and to the social themes in his films. So, how did that feel hearing that about yourself and your work?
Oh, I tend to be hard on myself, which is one of my little ongoing battles. So I'm never quite so impressed with anything.
Mm,
But I feel like, when I hear that, I say that I've had a really tremendous journey that, I'm learning to be proud of the accomplishments and achievements that I've had along the way, although I haven't reached where I really want to get to yet. And so
yeah,
I'm forcing myself to be a little more open to not just saying, you're not there yet, you have to kind of embrace some of the successes and appreciate what you had. So that's me.
absolutely. Absolutely. No, and I'm glad that you are giving yourself those permission slips. And I'm always giving you those permission slips, but I'm glad that you're getting those permission slips. And I'm curious, we're going to focus on kind of life after 40 because this is finding your voice after 40, but obviously you had a whole other life before 40. And so in this whole space of artistry, when did you realize I'm an artist? Like this is my jam. Film is my jam. At what point in your life was that?
It wasn't film first, so it
Okay.
was writing first. Writing was one of those things where, like, in class, if you had to write an essay or do something creative that was even extra credit or whatever, the things that I was writing was garnering some attention from my English teachers, humanities teachers,
Mm,
and I thought that journalism might be the thing. I always thought that I might write a book. I guess that's still on the table.
mhm.
And then we started to mess around with music. I was a really awful rapper, but I played drums, and
Oh, you played drums. Okay.
I played drums for what, about 8 years.
Oh, you're
Mhm.
a drummer.
I'm a drummer. Well, I don't think I can call myself a drummer anymore, but I was at one time.
I love it. Okay.
And so music kind of kicked in. We had some equipment, like a little 4-track recorder, and so I really started playing around with how layers work with audio,
Mm, okay.
which is it was amazing because it taught me what I was going to need to know, how to think about audio as it pertains to film when that came along.
Mm,
But I kind of got the idea that might have an interest in filmmaking because just projects we do in high school, we put some things together that were pretty cool.
mhm.
And when I got into college, I forced my way into a video class. They were hard to get into at my school, but I got in, and what became very clear really quickly is I had a knack for it. I had this is sort of a natural ability for telling stories visually with audio and layers, and it was
Mm.
very clear in when you present your projects to the class. It's kind of like the class would show their little videos, and then I show mine, and it was like, whoa. But
Yeah.
I understand that's kind of like how most people kind of find things that they're really good at. Is just you're just doing it because you love it, and then all of a
Right.
sudden you realize that there's something there.
Yeah. 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 No, that's so funny that every artist that I think I've talked to so far, because you're part of the Art Voices Matter series, there's this. Well, I first was, and it's so funny, not to pick on my black men, but everyone. Well, I first was a rapper. I really wanted to rap, like, and that I've almost feel like that's a rite of passage to because both my sons, like, they have to rap, like that's a part of for them becoming. I mean, I don't know what that's about, but
No, it's I know for me, like this was when rap was kind of really growing, right? And it was
mhm.
so much around me in the space. And I think it was one of those things you owe it to yourself to give it a try. And and then at some point it becomes clear, like the people who are good, you're like, yeah, what they're doing is different than what I what I do.
Right. It's like, and that's the other part that I see with my sons. It's like, yeah, but both of them right now think that they are beast rappers. They haven't hit the point yet, at least. But at any rate, but no, so awesome. So for you, so it all kind of came together, and I guess once you left college and it was time now to get in the world, did you say, okay, yeah, that's it, I'm gonna make movies? Or how did you want to project yourself, after having the training and the kind of the academic environment, getting out of that, what were you seeing for yourself?
But when I left, I had quite the conundrum because I went to Cornell University. It's not known for producing filmmakers. There's no film program to speak of.
Hmm.
So it was sort of video was my introduction. I wound up getting an internship at the NBA Entertainment, and so I was sort of building skills little by little in that direction. But I wasn't prepared to step out and direct films. There's the people
Mm.
who went to Howard and the people who went to
Hate you.
Temple and USC, UCLA. All the schools. They kind of came out with a really good idea of how they wanted to tell their stories. For me, I was just trying to figure out a way: can I make a living in the business,
Mm,
and
mhm.
can I make a living being creative? And so that was a trick because I come from a family that was not too keen on this artist life. They were. I wouldn't go so far as to say that they discouraged me, but
Mhm.
they weren't super excited about the prospect of a starving artist who's going to live in their house for a number of years. So so I wanted to
Yeah.
find a way to make a living and to be creative. And so I got my first job out of college at NBA Entertainment.
Awesome.
And so
And so
that was
you
doing you know for people who are old enough, who are like basketball fans, you'll remember the "I love this game" commercials that they had. I was working on those, and then there was the weekly show that was called Inside NBA Inside Stuff. Ahmad Rashad
Uh-huh.
was host,
I remember that.
and
Uh-huh.
so I would do some things for that as well, and a
Mm.
bunch of other things. But it was a starting point where I had like a really good training ground. A lot of very serious professionals who took the care and time to train me up
Yeah.
and actually would believe in my ability and just really encourage me.
Awesome. Awesome. So that's interesting. And thank you for sharing that because I want people to understand as artists, you know, your artistry, especially when it comes to film and music, is so broad. I mean, we see visuals everywhere, and there is sound in that everywhere. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking if you say, you're in film, that must equal you do epic movies and that's it. And that but that film exists in so many areas. So there's a lot of pathways, to get there. And there's a lot of ways, therefore, to express yourself, when it comes to film. I'm curious to know at what point in your life, what age frame would you say that you were like, it's time for me to really sit down and tell the stories that I want to tell? And, I mentioned the cycle and when I was just talking about you. And so maybe give me a little perspective of when did that pop up for you? And what was I guess, the push that was like, no, I'm going to move on this.
Yeah, I guess what I would say first is that it was a long time in which I was sort of just doing sports and TV related sports.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe I had actually given up on doing films. That might have happened for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was a good friend of mine went out on a limb. He took a class that just like it was a weekend workshop, and they're like, "You have to get out there and do it. Just go make your film." And he's like, "I'm gonna go make my film," and he did. He went out, and in 30 days, he along with his wife and a bunch of talented people went out and they made a feature film.
Oh, wow.
And because he knew of my interest, and he knew that I had been editing for a long time, and he knew how to be free.
Mm. Ah.
or next to free, right? I got to edit his feature, and that sort of did something to me. Is
Mhm.
like a big kick in the pants. It was just like this is he just decided he was going to do. You've been thinking about this for how long?
Right, right.
So 2 years later, I put together like a really quick 90-second film, which wound up winning an award. I was like, all right, maybe I should just stick with directing a little bit and try again.
Mm.
And then the cycle was born out of an incident that happened in Brooklyn. What was that? That was the 2000s.
Mhm.
And I'd heard about the story, and so I went and kind of interviewed the people who were experiencing the worst of it and the best of
Mm.
it.
Mhm.
And I decided, like, let's try to make something out of this, and I, we fictionalized just a little bit of it, but a lot of the core story remained the same. But
Mm.
I wanted to, it was representative of the kinds of things that I wanted to do. I like, stories that are a little more complicated, that
Mhm.
are not as simple as you might think, where characters are not like the evil villains. Just, I wanted to do something where you could see gentrification in
Mm.
Brooklyn that wasn't gentrification based on race, right?
Mm.
It was middle
Mhm.
class Black families that were moving back in. Same thing had been happening in Harlem. And I wanted to kind of tell a story that kind of surrounded those set of circumstances. And like everything has changed now, but that
Yeah.
movie became a little bit of a time capsule because a lot of what you see in there is gone now.
Yeah. Which I was gonna ask you, is there, if people are curious to watch it, and is it available? Is it accessible for them?
Yes.
Okay.
So you can find it on my website, royclovis.com.
Okay.
Right now, it is really a film editor's website, and I
Mhm.
intend to kind of grow that as I step out in 2023 to do more directing. For the
Right.
last couple of years, I've been focusing on editing narratives a little more than I had been in the past. So the cycle is available along with another short film called Home, which is also available on there.
Awesome. And see, you gave that away early because I was going to ask you
Oh,
about
we'll
all
come
your,
back to
but
that.
but but we'll come back to it again. So let's peel this onion back a bit and let's talk a little bit more about, because our intention of bringing artists for finding your voice after 40 is one, to definitely give room and space for people to get to know your art. I think it's super important for us to see art in a much more holistic space than we're currently being fed
Mhm.
in mainstream society. But it's also to hear the backstories of artists. And it's funny. I understand a lot of time, a lot of the things that I do, especially as a coach and background in counseling is, it's very, yay and positive and inspire you. But, reality is reality. And I really want this podcast to be able to show the twists and turns of people. And so that we're all inspired to keep pushing despite
Mhm.
our twists and turns. And so I'm curious, as we kind of dig a little bit more into Roy, as you started approaching, or starting in your 40s, once the 40s hit, did you have to change the way you saw yourself as an artist, or has that just been consistent for you? Like how has it been in terms of your identity as an artist at this after 40 point?
Yeah, I guess I'd say that 40, I see it more as a starting point,
Mm,
right?
mhm,
Because part of, I think, what I was experiencing in my 20s and even my 30s was that I didn't feel that I had enough experience in the world to have a voice that was going to tell stories yet.
mm,
I feel like I was a little bit sheltered growing up. And then, when you go to college, you're sort of protected in this little bubble. And then you're kind of thrust into the world to kind of stumble and fall and pick yourself up, but you've had some training.
mhm,
And so I was doing a lot of that. And, and, and I think, for me, I wanted to, I always felt like I didn't know anything. I felt like I was
mm,
ignorant to the world
okay.
and very keenly aware of there's this big world around me, and I've only seen a tiny piece of it.
Mm,
And so I really wanted to travel. I wanted to study Spanish. I wanted to retrace roots. My dad is from Panama.
mm,
Mom is from St. Lucia. And I wanted to start that journey of sort of understanding more culturally.
mm,
And I made a really big effort. I was traveling and just kind of living and bouncing around and just trying to figure out how I might tell stories during that
mm,
time. It was like 40, I feel so much more secure in that I've seen enough of the
mm,
good, the bad, and the ugly in the world, and so now I feel like I'm a little wiser and I have a little bit more to say,
mm.
and hopefully, that will come across in the work that I'm doing.
Yeah. That's a really special point. And I think, as artists, we're telling stories, right? And so in our storytelling, the uniqueness and the beauty of an artist is the ability to tap into the emotion of the audience. And if you're not living, and experiencing, although I do believe artists have a natural kind of higher frequency, just kind of they're just more inclined to be able to tap into emotion and to other people. But this idea of taking the time to live and to live beyond the scope that maybe you've been exposed to is huge for artists. I think it's like super duper necessary for the craft, and that's kind of in most art forms. um you must live to inform, so you understand life to tell these stories. So
Absolutely. I think that I was developing that in the editing work that I was doing.
mhm,
And so for each discipline in there, it's a little different and a little tricky. So if you're an actor, for example, you really have to have that. That has to be early. It has to be first.
yeah,
If you're a director, it has to be earlier than a writer.
mhm,
As an editor, you can experience it a little bit differently because you're receiving this footage, and the footage has a story in it, and you have to kind of find it and be ready to receive this emotion that's coming at you and to really understand how to prepare it. And I felt
mm,
prepared to do that, but
okay,
the the directing, I felt in my mid 30s I was kind of getting there. The
mhm,
the writing, I'm still kind of trying to make myself a little more, I guess, a little more vulnerable to get
mm,
to some of that emotion, to some of the truth of what needs to
Mhm.
come out in the stories that I have in my brain. Because like if you're not vulnerable and if you're not speaking to the things that are uncomfortable in your
Mm,
experience, you're not going to be able to succeed with the writing. I don't think. And
yeah.
so I'm fighting that fight now.
I'm so glad you brought up vulnerability because that to me is what's missing in a lot of film. Like I too am one who's all about nuance and I want complication. I want complexity.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go on a journey. I want to dig. I want to be curious. And I find in more of the mainstream film, I mean, you have some standouts, you have some, exceptions obviously, but so much of what I feel like is, we're recreating wills, or we're just missing the vulnerability. And I never thought of that as the word. I was just saying we're missing depth. I keep saying depth, but I think what you just said as far as vulnerability is, I'm like, that's what it is. And I wonder now, hearing you, is that a reflection not just of the times, but is that a reflection of the artist? Like, is that necessary, I guess, for you to personally experience the vulnerability to bring it on? But based on what you just said, I
I
guess
think,
so.
yeah, I think that in order to make the kind of film that I would want to make, right? It's when you receive the movie, it's fulfilling your soul in some way because you're speaking to some truth about the human condition, and you can only do that, I think, if you've sort of lived it and experienced it, and you have a voice to present it in your own unique way.
Mm,
And I
mhm,
think it's true of singers too, right? And so, like, as
mhm.
somebody who really listens to music, Jen, just as like a wild example, I may have mentioned to you, I kind of did a deep dive and listened to Tracy Chapman's Fast Car.
I don't know if we talked about that. Oh,
Okay, so that record, I'd heard it forever, right? It's been out for
three
forever.
million years. Yeah.
But if you catch it at the right moment and just really kind of dive in and listen as an adult, and now that you've had some times that were really difficult and you just wanted to kind of get away from everything, and you listen to that song, it has the potential to throw you into a space. Like tears will come, and
Uh-huh.
you feel the desperation, but it was written with that desperation in there. And so I think
Yeah.
it's a similar process. What attracts me to music often is the writing, the lyrics,
Right. Mhm.
and it's the same thing with usually with movies, is that something about the way the story was written and
Mhm.
delivered, um, and everybody's sort of rewriting the movie, as you know. It's like the script does one thing, and then the actors, you may not give them credit as a writer, but they are like breathing a new life into your story. And then,
Right.
of course, the same for everyone who touches the film, so the director of photography, and then of course the editor gets it, and everybody's sort of rewriting the script in their own
Right.
subtle ways, or sometimes not so subtle as an editor. But that's the thing. It's just like I really believe that the writing, it comes from a place of truth, and just saying something about what we all go through.
Yeah, yeah. No, every time you say something, it makes me think of something a little bit different than what I was planning to ask you. And so, with what you just said, and I wonder. So, one of the things that I'm seeing in film, and I would love to hear your opinion on this. I think we are seeing more Black film, and when I say that, I mean beyond the main screen, like the streaming, the Hulu's, the network, Netflixes, so forth. We are, I think, seeing more Black directors and writers, getting their work out there. Um, but one of the things that I feel is happening in some spaces is, and it might be tied to what you're saying, because of the different people who are approaching the lenses. I'm seeing some beautifully shot films, like where I really feel the image, and even beautifully edited in a way where I really I want to love it. But then the writing, I'm like, but I don't love this story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I never thought of it because I'm like, what's going on? We just have no good filmmakers. It's like, no, it's like it's these pieces, and I don't know, that just made me think like, wow, maybe that's, people, the writing might be over here, but man, that was shot amazingly. And I mean, you're just bringing to my brain like, oh, it must be that they're tapping a bit more into something as opposed to a writer. So with you, when you're being the film director and editor, Like that's a double space that you have to be able to tap into that vulnerability. So what are the things you're doing to get there? You said you're working on this. How do you work on that? Like what is that? What does that mean?
Well, so in the case of you receiving a script that is not your own writing,
Mm-hmm.
the process is really diving in, and your work is very similar to what an actor would do. You're trying to find ways to understand the story beyond what's on the page. So
Okay.
what's happened in these scenes before we got to the scene, right? And what is this character's backstory? Where are they from? What have they experienced? What's making them behave the way they do? What what are their fatal flaws? You're trying to
Mm-hmm.
identify all those things in your own sort of research.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of allows you to start building layers that are beyond the page, which is really what you want. And
Mm-hmm.
it's something like they're not said, they're not spoken, but you feel it.
Right. Right.
And you need to, as a director, you need to be able to be available to actors when they're having a hard time with the material.
Mm.
So, and you can feel it on set if they're not connected to the material. You're like, there's not a spark, there's something that's missing, and you don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Like it's hard to understand what exactly is going on. And then you talk to the actor and you're trying to figure out, what are the choices that you're making. You may not want to do that specifically, but you want to offer either some guidance, or this is what you're trying to accomplish, or
Right.
have you ever experienced a scenario like this, and you can kind of move that emotion into the scene. But you're
Right.
always trying to connect it to something that's deeper than what's on the page. And I think as an editor, I'm always looking for that in the performance, right?
Mm.
So I can see it
Yeah.
when it comes to my
Yeah.
computer.
Yeah.
And so I edited, like last year I edited a film in French. And so like, I don't need to know the language. I can see the emotion that's happening on the screen.
Right.
That's what I'm working with. So,
Right.
that's,
Right.
to me, uh, those are the things you're just trying to find something that's more soulful.
Yeah. And so this segues me to kind of this question of self-care for you and you tapping into your own vulnerabilities because you had mentioned that that's something you're working on. What is that looking like for you? What
Well,
does self-care look for you? What does it even mean for you to work on your own kind of vulnerability? What does that mean?
vulnerability. This is a hard one for me, right? So, I I don't display this as much as I used to when I was younger, but I'm very much an introvert, and I'm, kind of shy. And
Mm,
I had to make like a little program for myself to break out of it, because I was realizing how many opportunities I was missing out on in
mm,
all facets of life. Because, sometimes you don't show up, you don't say anything, you don't speak up, nobody knows.
mm.
So one day I'll write a book about this program, but I've I think I've arrived at a point where people don't just think of me as an introvert anymore. They don't think of me as shy anymore. And
Okay.
I'm starting to learn that about myself. Maybe I don't think that so much either.
Mm,
Which is why becoming a director was a little bit easier. It taps into that part of me that wants to break out and talk to people and do things.
mm,
So
mhm.
but the vulnerability though is the next step in the game, right? It's like you want to be a little more extroverted, but doesn't mean I'm actually giving you substance all the time.
Right.
I think that I usually am. But as it pertains to art, right? As it pertains to art, you have to give a little bit more of yourself than even just what I would normally
Absolutely.
get, right? So I'm a little
Absolutely.
hesitant to do that, but I'm working on that.
You're
Where
working on it.
that's the writing part.
Okay. I got you. I got you.
Self-care for me though is,
Yeah.
I think there's an equilibrium for me that if I break away from my equilibrium for too long, I find myself in a little bit of a depressive state.
Mm,
So
mhm,
and it's all the things that people would tell you to do just on a natural, like, health kind of consciousness wellness plan, right? Like, you want
mhm,
to make sure you get a good night's sleep, you want to make sure you get some sunshine, you want to go for
mhm,
a workout, you want to eat right.
mhm,
And it's like any little piece of that falls off, it like really just kind of tumbles the whole structure for
mm.
me in a bad way. And then, like, I get into this feeling where I'm on the treadmill and I can't like get onto a comfortable place on the treadmill. I'm on, like, right on the back edge, I'm about to fall
Right.
out. that's how it feels like perpetually when I'm in that stage, right?
Okay.
And so
Okay.
now, I've recognized when that happens, I have to take a couple of drastic steps. And sometimes it means just take a week off from work and just make sure you find your rest for the first couple of days, and you make sure you're eating right, and make sure you get like all of those things. You have to restart and
Right.
do it. And then
Right.
by the end of that time, you have to make sure you've then moved everything into a place where it actually would fit into your schedule. Right. So
Right. Right.
so
Right.
so
Right.
for me, that's what self-care is. And then doing things that I love. For me, the long walks in New York City in particular. I love long drives for the same reason. It's like a meditative kind of a thing that I enjoy while
Yeah.
traveling.
Yeah. And that's why I said you're way hard on yourself because I think that you do a lot to nurture yourself.
Mm.
I think, when I think of self care, I think of prioritization and I think of nurture. And so whatever, shows up that way and prioritization of self, how am I prioritizing myself and not this year, but, on a daily basis, how do I do that? And what are the constructs of how I'm nurturing myself? And when I talk to you, I'm like, oh, you're doing this. You're in what country? You're how you get to take. So I again, I'm gonna give you, your permission slip to really. I think that's amazing. That you naturally do that, and I think as artists, it's urgent to do that because you are taking on the vibrations of so much other energies to to create. So so I love
Yeah,
it.
that's for sure. And but just the things that you've grown up loving, sometimes you don't realize it, but you sort of stray away from things that you
Hmm.
love. I
Hmm.
remember you telling me how you kind of found your way back into music. I think you shared that on the podcast, and
Hmm.
it's like there's a piece of you that's missing if you're not doing that. And
Absolutely.
so it is something simple, just going out to shoot basketball a little bit. For me, it's always trying to find new music, and
Yeah,
that
Roy is
like
a
that's
true
sort of thing.
music. You and now I'm like, did I know he was a drummer? Did I know that? And I'm like, I've known you like I don't know how many years now for several. I don't know if I knew that. Okay. Well, at time like really flies. I'm like, oh my God, it's already 30 minutes have flown by. I wanted to ask you maybe two more things. And since you're a music head, one of those things is going to be maybe a little bit challenging. But before I ask my music question, what are you most looking forward to at this time in your life, being kind of past this 40 mark? I know you, by the time people hear this, your birthday will have passed, but upon recording, you've got a birthday coming up and all the things. But what are you most looking forward to at this stage of life?
Well, I think it is what I'm hoping for is to be a little bit better at connecting with friends. I think we're all so busy that it
Mm,
just I feel like we lose touch with people that you don't want to lose touch with. And again, I feel like they're a part of me, so I want to
mhm.
be around them a little bit
Yeah.
more than I have. Um, I enjoy reconnecting with people, so I'm hoping to make that a significant part of my life going
Mm,
forward.
yeah.
I'm wanting to see more live music, and I want to do certain things that were on my list. And just continue to learn language, continue to
Mm.
find the music, maybe learn guitar a little bit. Is sort of like
Ah.
that's like my third language, so Spanish, French, then guitar.
I love it. Yeah, guitars are hard. It's harder than what you think. It seems like a simple instrument. I don't know. I didn't. I tried. It's because I'm a piano player, and the thing with piano players are span. You see how my fingers like really span far like that because you have to be able to stretch to
Yep.
really work the keyboard. But guitar is a very fine motory intricate. So I just felt like I was in a claw position all the time playing the guitar. I was like, this is so uncomfortable. I can't do this. Never mind. I'll just listen to the guitars. It's like,
But yeah, they both of them look very like impossible to me. But but I'm wanting
oh,
to try a little bit just because I enjoy the sound so much.
yeah, no, I would love to, particularly as a singer, just being able to, sing and play the guitar at the same time. I mean, I sing and play keyboard, but yeah. But well, the point you made about connection and we'll begin to wrap up, I want, you are uber good at staying connected because I want to say that I met you in 2010. I want to say it was around there, 2010 ish.
Hmm.
And we met through some mutual friends who are dear, dear friends of mine, family basically to me. And I think they're much like family for you.
Yes.
So I knew you had to be a decent human because, if you were close with them, because they are the pews, really, really love them. And through you kind of you meet people. It's like, okay, yeah, it's nice meeting you. Oh, we're gonna stay in touch. Okay, yeah, oh yeah, and then you move on, and I never saw that person again. Um, but wanted it because you are really good at keeping your connections and valuable and meaningful connections, and not just connection because I said I was. You do that beautifully, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to be better about that. And we always make sure we know we don't get to talk to each other, every month, every whatever, but I don't think a year has ever gone by where we didn't just say, listen, I'm just touching base, see how you're doing.
Hmm.
So that's another space. I'm giving you your flowers again because you're very good at that, super
Hmm.
good at that.
But
Yeah.
I think for us as artists, the conversation is like giving permission. I feel
Mm.
like you were at a point when I met you that you needed permission to to sort of
Yeah.
say this is missing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I sensed it, and I think that you might have expressed something to that effect. Not that it was me specifically, but I think like the
Right.
universe was kind of conspiring to kind of push you in the direction. And I think I connect with artists a lot
Yeah.
in that space where everybody's like, no, I need to settle down and have a full time job and not ever do anything creative ever again. And I always try to, remind people, especially kids who are coming up into college. And I think, parents are still discouraging people
Mm.
because of, the fear of the starving artist story.
Mm.
But we're in a different landscape now. And I was like,
Yes,
it's worse if you're not feeding that part of yourself somehow, some way.
absolutely.
So you have to kind of figure out which way is best for you. And so, yeah, it made it
Yeah.
easy to just be like, hey, are you writing songs again?
And
Where can
that's
I
what
hear
he would
some
do.
music?
What are you doing creatively? I'm like, I don't know. So it's just really helpful. And I think as artists, we have to do that for each other. And it doesn't have to be within your same genre of art. I mean, it can be, or within your same space of art. We have to be there for each other. And so you always remind me that. And it's funny when my son, when I saw early signs of him really getting into editing and video, so forth, I contacted you because I was like, what do I need to do to get him to, because he's like 11. I'm like, what do I need to do? Because he got an eye for it. I know it. And you were like, you need to leave him alone. And I'm like, what? What do you mean leave him alone? And you're like, you need to leave him alone. And I want to tell you how powerful that was because I said, oh, okay. But I saw the gift. I saw that he could do this really, really well because he was so young and he was being able to edit his own, you know, footage of when he's playing basketball and he's looking at films and being able to tell me they edited that wrong. There was an apple in that scene and this. And I'm like, what? And he's 11 saying that. And so now, a decade later, he now has this YouTube channel that is blowing up, and it's all of him editing, videos and talking. And like you said, he did music growing up, so his inclination to be able to hear the timing in which music needs to be added, or and I left him alone and he figured that out on his own. And obviously he's still young, so he's still going to be exploring that. But I think again, having these connections isn't, it's just always good to have community. Maybe it's not even related to what you're doing, but just supporting each other in our families, in our
Absolutely.
lives, beyond. You have watched me go through a lot of different things personally. I've watched you go through a lot of things personally, and it's just been really. I just really appreciate that. So what y'all hear is the truth. That is Roy for real. So yeah,
Thank you.
awesome,
Likewise,
awesome,
you're a big inspiration to me as well. And
awesome.
what I appreciate most is that you're always trying to figure out a new way. This is not working like I thought it might. What's the next step? And I
Yeah,
think that's admirable, and it's like a good, it's a good reminder
yeah.
that 2023, yes, we have to find a way. Just
Gotta
keep
find a way.
finding
Find
ways.
your voice. Find your voice. Keep finding your voice. Awesome. Well, we're getting ready to wrap up. We are going to do a bonus, and I'm going to have Roy offer some tips. Those of you who may be interested in how to kind of break into this space, whether it be editing or film, writing, directing. So if you're curious about that, and yes, after 40, yes, please, like he said, it's just kind of starting at this point. So if you're a Patreon member, you'll be able to watch that. But I before we do that, music head, fellow music lover, what's your theme song? Like, what's a song for you that just every time you hear it, it's like that's the cut. That's it.
Well, I guess I don't engage with music quite like that.
I knew you
but,
were gonna just answer. Just what's a song
uh,
that motivates or inspires you today? Like, I mean, it
I
doesn't have
will.
to.
Well, but here's what I'll do. I will tell you that a song that I would put out there as maybe a song if I were to have a mantra or something like that. I would offer up "Now or Never" by The Roots. It's been out for a while. It must have been 10, 12 years,
Yeah, I know, but it's a good.
and
Yeah.
it's a good one. And it just like I said, the writing is beautiful on there. I love the music, and it's a good. When I'm going for my walks, going for my runs, I'll put that on and just like, yeah, it's now or never. Let's keep going, and we're
Yeah.
gonna do something special this year. I don't know what that is, but it's coming.
Awesome. See, you got it. You picked one. I know that felt a little constraining, but you did it. So awesome, awesome. Well, this has been. I knew it was going to be delightful. I'm glad you took that leap of faith and allowed yourself to get vulnerable.
Yeah,
Ta-da!
a
An
little bit,
exercise of vulnerability,
just a little bit.
and coming from behind the camera to the front. And so, yes, those of you, please come to Patreon so you can see Roy, because you ain't gonna see him nowhere else because he's not. Although I am gonna have you share. You mentioned your website, so if you can mention that again, and if on social media, where people could follow you, if that's a space that they can follow you.
Yes, so you'll find my website. It's royclovis.com. On Instagram, I'm not really active, and I'm not really active on Twitter either. But if you want to take this journey with me, I think that that's one of the goals for 2023 is to be better with Instagram specifically.
Okay.
So sharing
All right.
photos and sharing some videos. So you can expect that. That would be if you find it, there's Roy Clovis at Mundo Local Films or just at Mundo Local Films. I don't know, but
I'm gonna put it all in the show notes so that we
okay,
and we can all hold you accountable because be like,
that's
we
right,
want to see some more, Roy. We want to see
right,
some more.
that's
All
right.
right, awesome. I love that. I love that. All right, for those who are listening, we will be back next week. For those that are watching, stay tuned. Okay, we'll see you guys. All right, bonus. So, to that person, and I'm kind of one of these people, so I need probably some of this advice. That person who is like, I want to do film, I want to get in there. What is probably the top tip you would give that person to get started? Maybe a person who's never really gotten in it, but they really have always been passionate about it.
First thing is, I would tell anybody who's thinking about writing, directing, first and foremost, write and direct. This is like
Mm.
literally just start writing and don't stop writing.
Mm.
And even if it's just if you have a bad story idea, just write the bad story idea, get it out of your body, so the new ones can kind of come in.
Mm.
And
Good point.
it
Good
is
point.
really well, I think musicians do the same thing. They're like, yeah, I just got this song. I don't think it's that good, but I'm gonna make it. And sometimes
But
it's the
that's
best
not
record
no.
you
See,
hear.
musicians have more egos now. They think their first word, like this is the jam, this is it, and it's usually the reverse. Somebody has to come in and say, no, that's not really it. Like, keep writing. So it's
Okay.
kind of opposite, but I hear you. I
No,
hear
well,
you.
I think it's the same for us, where we're writing it because we're thinking there's something to the story, and often there is something to it, but you just haven't maybe you haven't found exactly what that is yet.
I got
So
you.
you'll be writing around the truth and the thing that would
Mm,
work. So,
mm,
but you don't know that unless you start writing, because no one
yeah.
can help you until it's on the page. It's in your mind. Nobody can help you.
Yeah.
So
Good point.
the
Good
beauty
point.
the beauty of filmmaking right now is that filmmaking is still very expensive at the higher levels,
Hmm.
but it is next to nothing to do it just to tell a story. So, if you have your phone, the iPhones and Androids are more than capable of doing really good work, especially with some of the apps that are available. The new
Hmm.
iPhone has like this strange focus thing that we do
Yeah, I've
naturally in
seen.
film. And
Yeah. I see that. Hmm.
yeah, so there are all kinds of gadgets and tools that are very inexpensive that will do really nice work for you, especially if your story is good. Then people won't think so much about the quality of the picture. What they
Mhm.
will, however, hold you accountable for is the quality of the audio. So this is one like really
Yeah.
important piece of information. You can make something that doesn't look great. You want it to look great, but
Right.
you can get away with subpar cinematography. And for my DP friends who are listening, I'm sorry. I don't really mean that 100%. So we'll talk about that later. But the audio can't be bad
No.
because it audio and bad acting will take people out of the story faster than anything else. Bad
Yes.
writing will do it too.
Yes.
Those are the top three. But
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
my advice is really just to start doing it, to start telling stories. Make a make a commercial, make a 3-minute short film, make it with the
Mm.
most inexpensive tools that you can, and see if you start to improve and see if you want to continue. And if you do, then you start to sort of beg, borrow, and deal. And yo, can I get a
Right.
real camera
Right.
operator or a real director of photography? And how do you kind of grow it as you go along? But if you start with the story, start small,
Yeah.
um, that's what I would recommend.
I love
And
that. I
for
love
people
that.
who really want to dive in, I would recommend also just volunteering for local film festivals.
Mm.
It's a good way to
Yeah.
meet filmmakers, a good way to meet people who are just in the business altogether. And why not?
These
Just
are
show
really
them.
good tips.
Mhm.
I yes. Yes. I mean, volunteering, I'm always telling musicians that like don't get so caught up in just you. You need to get in the community, and get to, talking to people and, just seeing, this world that you say you want to be a part of. And so that you can kind of navigate which part of the world that you really want to be a part of because it's a big world, when it comes to music and film and so forth. So
Mhm.
I love that. I love it. I love it. All right. My last question. What is something that I did not ask you that you wish I would have, or something you just want people to know about you and your story?
Okay.
Okay.
I want I want people to know, how dedicated I've been to pursuing this career. And you know, I said I don't like to beat myself up for not getting there, but like here's one crazy example of how committed I was. Uh, this was when I was 27. I had a job as a producer at Major League Baseball, and I quit the job to then go from being a producer to being a production assistant on film sets.
Mm,
Because my thinking was the only way I can get to directing the film set was to have some experience and understanding of how film sets work.
mm.
So I did that for about a year and a half. What's funny is there were a couple of commercials that I was working on where the client would be like this big ad agency that I had worked with in the past and my producer role, right? And
Right.
now I'm in the production system. They don't remember me.
They don't remember
So
you.
instead of getting the,
Wow.
oh, Mr. Clovis, uh,
That respect.
so
Yeah.
we get that.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, can you go get coffee and get some cookies? It's like, I was humble.
Ah,
I was humble to do it, right? But it was also
yeah.
sort of interesting to see how differently people treat you without knowing it, which was sort of the second point in this business. And music or entertainment, I think, might be like this altogether is the people who are your mentors might also be people that you are reaching to hire as you grow in the
Mhm.
business,
Mhm.
right? So it doesn't matter
Mhm.
that they're 10, 15, 20 years older. We're all trying to make a career. We're all trying to grow. We're all trying to do fun
Mhm.
things and tell these stories. And who better to do it with than your mentors who share something special with your history and
Absolutely.
understanding who you are. And I think it's a fun aspect of our business.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I mean, the relationship building in the arts is on another level because there's an intimacy in the arts. So it's one thing, in professional corporate or, in these other spaces where you got to network. But I feel like the arts it's like you just said, you have the ability to be doing things with and projects with mentors and with people and remember the arts, we're trying to get to the unspokens and the nuances. So connecting in those ways, there's a very special relationship that has to really happen with artists who when you're connecting like that. So it's critical that you're being authentic, that you're showing up, that you are articulating the best you know how, what it is you're needing and wanting, because
Mm.
there is an intimacy level to it, and not intimacy sexualized, but intimacy, although some people, it is the entertainment, but really meaning that artists, there's a vibration there, there's a nuance that you're attempting to create for other people to feel. So um well, I love it.
I
This
love
has
it.
been wonderful. I thank you again and again.
Yeah,
And
well, thank you for
now,
pushing me.
good, good. And I was like, let me make sure I make it comfortable. So, like you're sitting at home. But this is awesome. So, those of you guys who are watching, make sure you're following Roy. And push him to, yes, give us more so we can just be a part of his stories. So, thank you. Don't jump off quite yet, but I am going to end the recording. So, everyone, we'll be back next week. So, we'll see you then.